Yes, Blessing, you had a question about the lesson 15 on this beautiful but very challenging paragraph 1 of chapter 10. So please go ahead.
Yeah, my question was really in terms of the challenge that this teaching poses, in the sense that sometimes when I'm going through difficulties or going through struggles, I don't have the desire to to necessarily come to prayer, or I'm distracted even when I do come to prayer. And even though I'm trying to hand over the problem or the situation or whatever it is that is worrying me to the Lord, it's a constant it's a constant struggle during the prayer session, trying to keep handing it over. So yeah, it's really a challenge in that sense.
So you find that St. John of the Cross advice is what, like impossible to practice?
It's very difficult to implement. It just doesn't feel like I'm actually making any headway or having any success in that sense. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your question, Blessing, and I'm sure many people relate to you and to what you are saying, what you are describing. Let me clarify something I find important to underline. St. John of the Cross invites us to be. Let us remember the sentence I stopped upon toward the end of the lesson, which is to be recollected in one single desire for God. How can we interpret this? How can we put it into practice? It would be, I think, and I say it humbly, I think it would be dangerous to think that it is possible for a human being to be constantly recollected in one single desire for God, actively, positively. Like being in a state where you are almost, I would say, so focused, you would be almost, I would say, in a way, absent to the rest of what is happening around you. Is this what God expects from us? Is this state possible? Is this state real, etc.? So all these are important questions, because we want to sort of connect with the text, with the advice, with the teaching of John of the Cross, and we want to implement them. But if we are misguided in the implementation, that can be very disheartening, or misguiding, also misleading, etc. Now, it is important to know, let us take different examples. I will take first an example of the most basic form of prayer, which is the prayer of the heart, which impermeates a little bit all other forms of prayer. The prayer of the heart, which is mental prayer, contemplative prayer, the prayer, in fact, that Son of the Cross tries to support and help throughout his works, because that was essentially the prayer used by the Reformed Carmelites, especially St. Teresa of Avila, who sort of renewed the practice of it, asking for the monks and nuns to practice twice a day, an entire hour of silent prayer, contemplative prayer, twice a day. So but it is a form of prayer that can be practiced throughout the day. I can stop at any moment and then put myself not only in the presence of God, but also to immerse myself in God himself. So I'm practicing, in a way, in this case, the prayer of the heart, but in a very short time, like ejaculations, like arrow prayers, like Jesus prayer. All these prayers are this type of prayer. Now, the question is, what does it mean to be recollected in one single desire for God? Does this mean that during the entire hour or during the entire time I set for my prayer, it could be 20 minutes, could be 5 minutes, it could be 3 minutes, am I supposed then, this question is very important. Does this mean that when I will pray, I will be totally in the awareness, in my awareness, totally recollected in God? In other words, will I be then exempt, my prayer will be exempt from distractions? Of course, that's not possible. That's a misunderstanding of what normally happens. Prayer happens in our spirit or in the deepest part of our being, and this is where the connection happens. I hear your objection, so because you will say, okay, but then what does it mean to be recollected in one single desire of God? So let us then distinguish two regions in our being, things that you know, but I'm just reminding you. You have the deepest part of our being, which is beyond perception and consciousness, the spirit, according to the teaching of John on the cross, that it is our spirit who enters in direct contact with God. But the recollection he's talking about is not only the spirit, but he's talking also about the soul, the active and conscious soul, because the acts of the desire that he's talking about, these are active acts. When I pursue a creature, when I pursue with my desire and will a creature, this is active. So how can we understand two things? What are we supposed to do? And also to distinguish that it is possible to be distracted, but not to have, but to have paradoxically all our energy with God. That's new. That's new. That's not in the text, because the text doesn't claim yet here to explain everything. You can find this explanation elsewhere in his writings. So let us talk about these two aspects. First of all, if the prayer works, and it will work when with one good act, I'm offering everything, my concerns, my distractions, my worries, and myself to God. If I gather all myself and offer myself to God, then technically, deep in me, the connection occurs. I did one act, I'm not in a constant state of recollection. My active part made the act, produced the act. But as a result, a deepest part of myself now is immersed in God. Now, the conscious part doesn't fall back into desires, but it can fall back in something less active, which is what we call the passive distractions. So your worries, your difficulties, your tiredness, everything can very much be there again. And you can have very much, you, anybody, me, I'm not talking necessarily about you. One can have the perception that all my energy is not given to God. Why? Because I am under the influence of passive distractions. And on purpose, I'm using the word passive. I will come again to the active again, to the active, because the passive can become active, okay? So here, let us measure ourselves with St. John of the Cross text. He says, you need to be recollected in one single desire for God. Now, are we recollected in this case in one single desire for God? The answer is yes. You will say, but Jean, I feel that I'm tired. I feel that I'm distracted. I feel that I'm not there totally. My answer will be the following. This is not what prayer should achieve. This is an exceptional prayer, and some people think that this is prayer. Teresa of Avila calls it the prayer of union, not union like spiritual marriage and things like that. No, no, no. It's just beginners in the supernatural life, no? Prayer of union. She says, what is union? Prayer of union, not union with God. Prayer of union, she says, when the conscious part also is taken. So many people will think, okay, this is what John of the Cross means. Prayer of union, which means all the conscious part is also recollected with God. While this is an exception, an exceptional grace that God sometimes gives, but not always. The common case where God is satisfied, where God is happy, is when I offered myself to him. So I made what I am supposed to make, but God often leaves us almost in a natural state where I have the impression that all the tiredness of the day, say you are praying in the evening, no, say at 8:30 or 9 p.m. So of course you have all the tiredness of the day, all the problems of the day, all the worries, whatever, you know, the list is long, but everything comes back. You offered it, but then you have the impression that it's like elastic, no? Elastic band came back again, it hits you back. It's like you push it away, you give it to God, and then it comes back again. So you have the impression that you're useless. You have the impression that you're not praying. You have the impression that you're not recollected, which is true. Which is true on the level of the conscious part. But on the level of the finest part of your being, you are immersed in him. But you don't know it. This is why I personally recommend, and all the writings, the great masters, Father Marie-Eugène and others, insist, say, because we don't know if we are connected or not, it's good from time to time, like the waves of the sea, to repeat that act of offering. Because I might come out. How will I come out? When I move on from passive distraction to active distraction. In this case, I'm going against what John of the Cross says. Passive distractions are not a lack of recollection. That's fundamental. You can be in the mass very recollected, but sometimes you can be in the mass surrounded by noise, etc. But that's passive. You don't mean to do that. You come back to it. You see, you come back in waves. You try to recollect yourself, but not being upset that you were distracted, because passive distraction is not doesn't go against recollection, the true recollection. But it bears in itself a certain risk that if I pay a little bit more attention with my will, then from passive distraction, it becomes active distraction. Then yes, but still again, peacefully, I renew the my active offering again. God will not blame me because of my weakness in this case, which is going from. So you see, God cannot blame me for the lack of profound recollection in the conscious part. So that's the point. Okay. So.
Don't despair, basically.
Be assured. Say again.
Don't despair, basically.
Say again.
You're saying do not despair.
Not only do not despair, be convinced that you are pleasing God by offering yourself, and you are not displeasing God when you are distracted passively. Because many people think that such a state is impossible because they translate the sentence by saying, this is active in the conscious part. I need to be recollected. And if I'm a little bit not recollected, that's the end of the world. That's misunderstanding the core of the prayer of the heart. And there are people who are like that, no? They are deeply convinced that recollection means you have to be completely like this, and if a fly is around you and took away your distraction, that's the end of the world. You see, that's, you lost the recollection, no? And even, and I will go, I'm repeating a little bit the teaching I give when I teach the prayer of the heart, no? But it's important because this is the explanation of the text, because otherwise the text is terrible. It's too hard. It's like, it's not like, it is impossible, simply impossible. I forgot what I wanted to say.
You're going to repeat a part that you normally give when you're teaching.
Yes, but there is a one point I wanted to say, it's gone. Anyway, it will come back. So people think that this is recollection, no? To be completely, it came back, thank God. There are people who are unconsciously influenced by the Far Eastern spiritualities like Buddhism, meditation, Zen, and certain types of yoga meditation, who teach in a Christian context that, and it could be understood as an explanation of this text, this passage, that in order to pray, we need to be free from any distraction. So in order to pray, we need to empty ourselves from everything. This is sadly relatively spread amongst people who are fervent, who are committed to contemplative prayer, Christian, Catholic contemplative prayer. This advice is very dangerous because this advice mixes the two levels and doesn't understand exactly what is supposed to happen, what pleases God, what is God expects from us, and what is the common state of a person who prays. You can be perfectly distracted passively the entire hour, and you can be very much, in the eyes of God, totally recollected. This is why it is impossible to judge, to evaluate the prayer of the heart. It is too delicate, too difficult for the average fervent spiritual person to be able to judge. You need somebody who knows exactly the ins and outs of it in order to help. Otherwise, you are crucifying yourself. You want to empty yourself from all thoughts and everything. I mean, this isn't simply not possible. It's an illusion that Buddhism is pursuing. It's impossible. It's inhuman. And does God dwell in my consciousness? God dwells in my spirit. My consciousness cannot receive God. Otherwise, that's rubbish. This is a created perception. You see? So it's a very, very bad advice to give, and it would be a very wrong way to understand St. John of the Cross sentence, which is the soul needs to be recollected in one single desire for God. No, this is these are acts. Now, the result could be long-lasting for, I don't know, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, or longer. And the more the person grows spiritually, maybe the longer the person stays. And if the person is united with God, the person is there for in a stable way, but still not in an active way. So you need to be very careful with the interpretation of this. So I insist a lot on saying that these are acts. So you recollect, you sit down, you offer your distractions, you offer your day, you offer everything to the Lord, and then you offer yourself. And then, as I give the advice, you hold your rosary and repeat gently a short prayer in order to avoid a little bit the active distraction, in order to diminish the pressure made by the passive distraction. Yes, you see, to diminish. You can never cut them. It's only when the prayer of union is given, which means when God gives an extra grace that is not necessary, but he gives it sometimes, he knows why, where he recollects the rest of our being, the conscious part. So yes, at this time you will say, oh, I had an amazing prayer of the heart because I was entirely like lost in God. Yes, but this is not the common way of prayer. No, this is a very rare exception. So if we mix them and think that this is what God wants for us to have, it's impossible for us, and it's not God's plan. It's not God's plan to give us the prayer of union all the time. That's nonsense. That's utter nonsense. I'm sorry. I might seem rude for some people, but I have to give the advice. Otherwise, it's deeply misleading. Okay.
Thank
Now,
you, John.
you're most welcome. I hope it sort of focuses the aim toward these acts. You can achieve this act at any time. Even if you are tired, you say, oh Lord, I offered you my tiredness. I offer you all my being. I'm talking prayer of the heart. Huh? I offer you all my being, etc. And then Saint Teresa of the Child Jesus says that she often did sleep during the prayer of the heart. But she says, I'm not afraid about that. I'm not worried about that. I don't feel ashamed by that. You know, a Carmelite life, especially in her time in summer, bears a lot of physical work because they go in the fields and they have to harvest. So by the end of the day, you are physically very tired, and obviously you will not. You will sleep. It's inevitable. How many times when I was the Carmelites many years ago, you know, you hear this or that brother who is you even hear him snoring. So it's normal. Nobody gets upset. It's just the way it is. Does this mean then the Saint Therese would worry? She says no. She solves it this way. She says no. I'm here for him. I offer him. I gave him myself. I'm here for him. He knows that. But if I'm tired, I'm tired. What can I do? God is God. Okay.
Thank you.
So I hope this helps. Otherwise,
No, thank you.
otherwise this the entire lesson 15 is extremely damaging. Otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Marty, I don't know. You had a question, but on Lexi Divina, I think also a little bit, Francesca. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, to go back to something you said in that last lecture, you know, you were speaking about that act of purity that we can do with the general help of the grace of God, and that it depends on us, you know, to express at that moment also in Lexio this desire to receive him and to get that word, to get that and you realize as well how hard that is. I think especially next year, I mean, I struggle a lot, and I think sometimes it's because of this that it could be, you know, one of those elements where this is a barrier to receiving that answer that you're actively looking for. I struggle with this, you know, that
yeah.
You feel like you sit and you give yourself, maybe you're not giving yourself enough to get that answer, or maybe you're not putting all your energy in when you should be, or you forget, or after, you know, days and weeks and months of doing it daily, you know, it goes down. And I don't know, is that possible? Could that be one of the things that we should really look out for?
Yeah. I thank you for your question. Your question is on a still on prayer, but a different form of prayer, which is Lexi Divina. And I would say that if we compare Lexi Divina and prayer of the heart, I think there is a huge difference in the difficulty wise. I think that Lexi Divina is immensely more difficult and challenging than the prayer of the heart.
I agree.
Providing the prayer of the heart is practiced with, I mean, with Lexio, not in the same time, of course, but with Lexio. Because if prayer of the heart is practiced without Lexio Divina, then, as St. Teresa of Avila says, you can practice prayer of the heart as long as you want, but if there is no work or the working of the virtues, you will not grow. So you will stay dwarf, spiritual dwarfs. So you won't grow. So when we talk prayer of the heart and Lexio, we talk putting them together, not in the same time, but together in once a day, if possible. Lexi Divina is way more difficult, and the implementation of the advice of St. John of the Cross, which is to recollect all our energy in one desire, the desire to hear the Lord, who wants to guide us. So it's a conversion movement. No, we want to change, we want to be converted, we want to be transformed through a word that the Lord is supposed to give us. So I have to say very humbly that yes, Lexio Divina is immensely more challenging than the prayer of the heart, because in this case we have to really gather our energy. I would say that Lexio Divina here, as a paired with the prayer of the heart, is also the test of quality of the prayer of the heart, in the sense that both of them depend on the prayer of the heart. Lexio Divina and the prayer of the heart both rely on a good Lexio Divina. Now, would I change what I said about gathering our energy and how difficult it is in Lexi Divina with all the examples that I gave? I am inclined not to change it, in the sense that I wouldn't lessen the difficulty here. I always say, I don't know if you remember, when I teach and present Lexi Divina, I always say during Lexi Divina, when you are expecting, when you are praying for the Lord to talk to you, you reach a point where you hit the wall of the silence of God, the silence of Jesus, that he's not talking to us, he's not talking to me. And at that moment, yes, you want to throw everything and say, forget about it. Yeah, we are tempted every time to sort of drop it and say, okay, well, it's too tiring, it's too exhausting, it's better to go and do something else. There are some exceptions in the practice of Lexio Divina, where for instance, in the big feasts, often you find it easier to practice, I guess. But in the normal days of the year, it is more difficult to practice. Very difficult, reaching almost levels of impossibility for us. So now, to be practical, should we drop the necessity to gather all our energy? No. You remember this drawing that I always made? I don't even know if I can show you again this drawing, maybe for people who are watching us, who never attended these teachings. So let me just find this drawing, at least, if you don't mind. There is a necessity to gather our energy. That's inevitable. Gather our energy talking to Jesus. not just insisting, not pure stubbornness. It's important to remember we are in front of the Lord. We are not just in front of a text. So it's important, as I always say, to lift our head and look toward the Lord in order to ask and beg from Him. So it's not a technical exercise, it's not an achievement, it's just entering in dialogue with the Lord. You see what I'm trying to say? So let me just, sorry, I'm just trying to find the text. Yeah, found the text, sorry. So it's just the simple drawing that I always make, but I think it's to see it does help. So I will share my screen if you don't mind, just a second to show you this example. You see, this is the drawing that I'm alluding to, and you find it in my book, The Method, and it's very much today's point with St. John of the Cross. This is the pan, these are the potatoes, and how can we reach purity, which is how can we really listen to God? And listening is this arrow that falls here. And you see, the solution is gather all the energies of our heart, and this arrow there is our desire that is increased toward Jesus. So whenever we reach that point of despair, I think that it's important to remember that this is the moment to do the act of faith, because all what precedes it, in a way, are purely general, with the general help of the grace of God, but purely human. I'm trying to understand the text, I'm begging, I'm reading again, I'm doing this. It's rather a human effort, which is good, it's necessary. But it will never make me enter in contact with God. As St. Ignatius of Loyola, when he talks about the fact when God talks to us, he says the initiative of God when He talks to us is sudden, which means you don't know from where it comes. Exactly as Jesus says, you hear the Spirit of God, but you don't know from where the Spirit of God is going and where the Spirit is going. From where it's coming and toward where it's going, you don't know, but you hear the voice, and it's sudden. Sudden, of course, not like frightening thing, but sudden in the sense that you didn't expect Him to talk. So when we reach that point of difficulty, we gather all our energy and one extra time, but I think that time it will be different, because compared to the previous ones were our trials. We tried and failed. But when you reach, I would say, the glory of failure, which means a maximum of failure, I think it's at this moment, instead of dropping the Bible and dropping Lexi Divina, you do a renewed act of faith, but this one will be different from all the others, because it will be one in a way that contains the failure, saying, Jesus, I can't. You speak now, I can't. Of course, I said it before, but it's not the same, because I haven't experienced my failure one more time, you see? And then renewing, resisting with faith. There is a passage in the Bible, in the New Testament, I think it's from St. Peter, if I'm not wrong, where he says, resist the temptation with faith. It's very easy to say, okay, I am tempted, okay, I will surrender, or I will try to do something else. No, he says resist, which means fight back. Resist means fight back, do not surrender. Fight back, but how? With faith, with faith. Remember that when you are tempted, to say, okay, you will reach a point where really you have no energy, you want to drop it completely, and then that moment, don't surrender, just resist, face it again and resist and say no. But now you will be relying more on God himself, you will be relying more on Jesus himself, you see. So it's not maybe directly the first moment of gathering all my energy, but I think it's one last moment where your gaze will cross Jesus' gaze, and then you will then see the difference. I don't know. It might help, might not help what I'm saying, but I'm trying to sort of.
Yeah, one has to go quite far, because there's so often times where I feel like I've done all this, and then still nothing's
Nothing happens.
nothing's happened. And then you really wonder, like, how much does he want me to beg? You know, there's none.
Yeah.
There's this. The worst thing is that then there's also frustration that builds up, which I guess then doesn't help.
No. Frustration is not good. Can I say something?
Sure.
And please don't take it personally. I'm just trying to think why would Lexi not work? And sometimes, so please don't take it personally. I'm not talking about you, because I'm not in your heart. Well, thank God. So it's God sees our hearts. We don't know, but we ourselves can look with the help of God in our heart and try to understand. Sometimes, paradoxically, we want him to talk, but part of us, again, I'm not talking about you, huh? Part of us wants the success of the lectio, or the consolation of the lectio, more than the Lord himself, in the sense that there is a lack of purity in doing lectio, in practicing lectio.
Intention.
Yeah, linked more to the intention. So I'm not saying it's your case at all. Please never think that. But I'm trying to help. So is this the case? And be careful, because sometimes one can fall into a scruple. So just if it's clearly there, then that's it. Because sometimes, yes, there's no answer. And then you wonder why, but then you think of yourself and say, yeah, maybe I was searching for myself, not searching for him. You know, we are very clever in doing that. Trust me. And I found that often amongst contemplative persons, like Carmelite nuns, cloistered Carmelite nuns. Sometimes you find that the desire for perfection is higher than the desire for God. I hope I'm making myself clear. Remember I always mention it, no? The cat attitude, no? What is the cat's job during the day, throughout the day? Is to clean, no? To lick. So the cat wants to be cleaner than clean. You have clean, and he wants to be cleaner than clean. So, you know, he watches himself as if he's in front of a mirror. He's never in front of a mirror, but because he can access his body, so he's just licking. So I think we have sometimes in spiritual life, in our desire to please God, in our desire to follow God, in our desire to love God, we have this tendency to, as I said, want perfection more than wanting God, our understanding and image of perfection, you see. Sometimes you find this more often amongst females than males, women than men. A woman is it's important. Appearance for a woman is very important, it's fundamental. Therefore, psychologically, when the woman deals with another person, and God is a person, no, Jesus is a person, you have the tendency to want to appear nice, no, tidy, you know, all what characterizes a woman, no? Which is normal. This is normality. It's not a criticism. It's just becoming aware of certain mechanisms that are there. So when you translate that into spiritual life, be careful, because we still behave the same way. We still want him to be pleased, but sometimes we don't think of what pleases him, but we think rather what we think he will be happy with. So it is still my projection, and not of perfection, of Lexio, of anything, and not necessarily his way. So I'm still going my way, not his way. And it is the desire of perfection. It is purely in the spiritual realm. I'm not talking about bad people. I'm talking about people who are amongst the best in the world. You still sometimes have this pitfall. And I use also to call something else, but this is not, of course, what our lecture or our talk or our lesson at all. It's something else. But I used to call it also the second sin, which is, again, it's more worrying about how I appear in his eyes. This is more typical of the women, and I'm sure there are people who will kill me now because I am gender, I don't know how they call these things, I'm politically incorrect. It's not at all my intention. This is just facts. These are facts. If they don't understand them, well, I can't do really a great deal. Okay, this is just our nature, how we are. Majority, not everybody, but the majority. I noticed it. It's there. You have the second sin. What is the second sin? Imagine I did something that is not good. So, normal behavior, I say, okay, God, Lord, I'm so sorry, I did that. But this tendency that I'm talking about would be what? Will be looking at my sin and then thinking that much about my sin that I'm spending more time on my sin, which is another sin. Instead of rushing toward God, I'm still focusing on myself because of a sin. You see, because of my desire of perfection, but I'm still focusing on my sin. So I'm committing a second sin, which is delaying the meeting with Jesus and his grace, trusting that he knows my weakness and he doesn't mind. But my image is so important, but it's something so unconscious in my mechanism in spiritual life that I say, oh, how can I do that? So you become too, how do you say? Do you say engrossed? No, engrossed in your sin. Like it sort of fills you more and more and more, which is a second sin because it's delaying love, delaying Jesus, delaying humility and throwing myself back again to him. You see? So can this shed some light? I have no idea. Maybe not. Maybe it's silly of me to mention it. Forgive me if it is the case. So, am I maybe the purity of intention? I don't know. Questioning perfection, questioning what pleases God, allowing God to be himself sometimes, allowing God to surprise us. Sometimes we have such an image of God that if he comes to us a little bit out of this box that we have in our frame that we have in our understanding, we wouldn't understand. The Saint of the Child, Jesus, is a genius person because she was extremely audacious. She thought out of the box, which is the case here, no? Allowing God to surprise her, allowing God to be different from the classic God she knew during her time. And thank God she did that, because then God was allowed to be himself with her. And in a surprising ways, in a very surprising ways. It's unbelievable. You read some of her texts, she said, this is crazy. It's not possible. That cannot be God. While in fact he is. So sometimes we might be blocking the revelation of God to us, because what is Lectio? It's also the revelation, the self-communication of God to us. He shows himself to us. So sometimes we might not have this flexibility of saying, okay, you talk the way you want. When Saint Therese talks about this child, no, who broke the vase and ran to his mom, so that's the example how we should behave when we commit something that displeases God. He ran to his mom and told her that he broke the vase, and added to that saying, okay, punish me with a kiss. When you read that, you say, well, is this spirituality? Is this God? You might have doubts. You say, is this possible? You do something wrong. You say to the Lord, I'm so sorry, but then you add, okay, but now punish me with a kiss. It's like, you are a spoiled girl, Therese, to say that. No, she's not. That's a new understanding of who is God. And sometimes we don't allow that flexibility. We stay with a certain understanding of God to the point that we don't allow it, and that could sometimes jeopardize progress in at least in certain types of prayers, say Lexio, for instance, which involves our mind. No, Saint Therese was criticized by other monasteries. After she died, her autobiography was sent to many Carmels in France. So we are talking 1898. So 1 year after her death. And many monasteries rejected it, said no. I knew personally Carmelite brothers who couldn't bear her till now. We are more than 100 years after. Her language, her examples, I don't know. For me, it's alien, but I have to humbly accept that she is challenging. But what is the core thing about Therese? It's God. Who is God? And the image of God she is translating and giving us is mind-blowing. I don't know if you know Father Anthony Doe. He's a holy priest here he's back in London. And I remember very well, he did his PhD on St. John of the Cross. And one day we were talking, I like him very much. He's a very deep and spiritual person. His mass is mind-blowing. Anyway, he'll be very upset if he hears all what I'm saying about him. One day he said, okay, read this and that passage from St. John of the Cross. So I went to read it. And this passage is of utmost beauty from John of the Cross, where John of the Cross talks about the humility of God, to which extent God is humble, and how he loves us in which way. I have to find out this passage if you want until. It's mind-blowing. So what is at stake here? What is at stake also, I think, comes also from a certain difficulty, an intellectual difficulty, which is the certain lack of flexibility sometimes in our mind to accept a different vision or revelation of God to us. It's the case of Saint Therese of the Church Jesus, rejected by great Carmelite nuns, prioress of other Carmelites monasteries, because the way she talks about God, the image of God she's presenting didn't fit. For them, God was, I don't know, more severe, more formal, more, demanding, etc. While the image of God she seems to present is a bit different than that. So of course, rejection doesn't fit the frame. So now let us come back to what we were saying. I'm trying to help. I don't know if I'm really on something interesting or not, but maybe sometimes we don't. Maybe we are invited to exercise a bit of flexibility, intellectual flexibility, to be challenged by something, an image of God that we are not used to. Allow God to surprise you. Allow God to show you the immensity. Yeah,
we do that unconsciously, obviously.
Of course.
So it's good then, I guess, to take conscious of that in order to create that flexibility.
This is what I'm talking. Yes.
Yeah. No. Exactly. Okay. So
Of course.
Very helpful. Yeah.
It never crossed my mind at this point. I have to say, look, I'm teaching Lexi Divina from '92. I never crossed my mind to think that could be a hindrance. Maybe it is. I don't know.
There seem to be many.
Yeah. But it's true. It is true. The Lexio Divina is fundamentally a communication from God to us, but using our intellect, our mind. So it's conscious. And maybe we might be putting some limits or frames of understanding of God, not allowing him to go further than the usual talk. So
no, your point's clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
So shall we stop?
Okay. Thank you.
So glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Thank you very much for your patience. Sorry, I was a bit long.